Will Smith walked into the courtroom without warning. No press, no lawyer, just him, and a look that said he wasn't here to play along. There was no announcement, no buzz beforehand. He simply entered through the side doors, quiet and deliberate, while the rest of the room carried on like it was just another day in court. The moment he stepped in, the energy changed. People stopped talking. Even the judge paused, eyebrows raised. And when Will walked straight to the witness stand and asked to speak, no one stopped him. "I wasn't asked to be here," he said. "I asked to be here." That was it. No build-up, no rehearsed lines, just the start of a testimony that would flip the entire trial on its head. Because what he said next didn't come from news reports or social media theories. It came from him. And it was the kind of story Hollywood pretends doesn't exist. He didn't look like a celebrity, not that version of him. He looked like someone who had carried something too long and had finally decided to let it out. Diddy, who had been relaxed at the defense table just moments earlier, suddenly wasn't. The courtroom, which had been full of quiet chatter and scribbling reporters, turned silent. This wasn't a headline moment. This was something else. And nobody, not even the people who thought they had heard it all, was ready for what Will was about to say. It started like a typical Hollywood invite. A mutual contact reached out, someone Will had worked with before. They said it was Diddy's birthday. Casual, nothing wild. Just a night of music, networking, and familiar faces. Will didn't think twice. He'd been to these things before. That's just how the industry worked. But the moment he arrived, something felt off. The party was deep in the Hollywood Hills, guarded by black SUVs and heavy security. As soon as he stepped inside, they took his phone. They said it was for privacy, to protect the guests. But to Will, it felt like something else entirely, like they didn't want anything leaving that house. Inside, the energy was strange. Dim lights, music that didn't quite feel like music. Low, repetitive, hypnotic. There were mirrors everywhere, but no visible cameras. Still, it felt like someone was watching at all times. After a few drinks and short conversations, Diddy approached him directly. No small talk, just a line we'll never forget. "Now you're part of the family." The way he said it didn't feel warm. It felt possessive. Thinking they were about to talk business, Will followed him into a back room. What he saw next didn't belong at any party. People were performing, men, women, even faces he recognized from the industry. But something about the scene felt wrong. Some looked far too young. Others just looked trapped. Diddy stood in the back, laughing like it was entertainment. Will froze. He didn't know how to leave. And that, he said, was the point. Once you're in, you're in. That night, he said, wasn't a party. It was a test. And whether he knew it or not, he'd already failed it. A few days after the party, the first call came. Blocked number. No name, no intro, just a voice on the other end saying, "Hope you had fun, Fresh Prince." Then silence. Will brushed it off. Hollywood is full of weird moments, but then the envelope showed up. No return address, no markings. Inside was a flash drive. He almost threw it out. Curiosity got the better of him. What he saw changed everything. Footage from that night. There he was, slouched on a couch, clearly out of it, his expression blank, eyes glazed. He didn't remember being that far gone. He didn't even remember sitting in that room. But there he was, laughing at something he couldn't recall. And then, a voice behind the camera, Diddy's voice, said clearly, "That's how we keep him." Will froze. That wasn't a memory. That was a trap. It wasn't about a party anymore. It was about control. From that moment on, everything shifted. He started getting more invitations. Same setup, different locations. He declined each one. And that's when the retaliation began. Film roles he'd been negotiating quietly disappeared. People he'd known for years stopped calling. Rumors popped up. He was unstable, cheating, hiding something. It felt too targeted to be coincidence. No one ever threatened him, directly. They didn't have to. The message was clear. Stay quiet or lose everything. Will said he understood in that moment that silence was the cost of peace. And for years, he paid that price without saying a word. The silence didn't just protect Diddy, it powered him. Will said the fallout wasn't a one-time punishment. It became a pattern. Every time he distanced himself, something shifted. A deal would vanish. A call wouldn't get returned. A rumor would appear out of nowhere, spreading just fast enough to stick. He remembered one deal in particular. In 2013, he was set to lead a major global campaign for a luxury brand. Contracts were drafted. They'd already shot the first lookbook. Then, nothing. The deal evaporated overnight. No reason given. 2 weeks later, another invitation came from Diddy. Will declined. Days later, the gossip blogs lit up again. Oddly specific stories about his personal life. Things only someone close to him could have known. That's when it clicked. It wasn't paranoia, it was a system. Diddy didn't have to pick up the phone himself. He had people for that. PR teams, label execs, producers, bloggers, a network of influence that didn't threaten people directly. It just made opportunities vanish. Will described it as psychological warfare. You start doubting yourself, wondering if you're imagining it, but eventually the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Every no had a price, and the more he resisted, the more expensive that price became. He said he knew others going through it too. Celebrities still locked in the same silence. Some were under contracts, some were just afraid, and some, he said, had already been broken. Will looked straight at Diddy in court and said, "You didn't just collect people, you controlled them." And suddenly, no one in the room was thinking about just one victim anymore. Will said he stayed quiet for nearly 20 years. He told himself maybe it wasn't real, maybe it wasn't happening to him. But all of that changed the day he got a call from someone he used to trust. Not a lawyer, not a reporter, just a voice saying, "You're on one of those tapes. They played it yesterday. People are talking." He didn't believe it at first. Then the memories came flooding back. The party, the flash drive, the way he'd felt sick without knowing why. That night, he didn't sleep. He kept replaying it all in his head, trying to piece it together. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was humiliation. He contacted the prosecution himself, told them he was ready to talk. "Whatever questions you have," he said, "I'll answer them." And when they asked if he wanted to hear the audio, he hesitated, but said yes. What he heard wasn't just damaging, it was devastating. "I heard myself laughing," he said, "but it wasn't real, it was hollow. I sounded drugged." In the background, slow music, voices, then a chilling sentence. Diddy saying, "That's how we break them in." Then he heard his name, not in conversation, but in a way he didn't want to describe. People were saying his name while doing things he didn't remember, things he didn't consent to, things he could barely even listen to. Will's voice cracked as he told the courtroom, "There's a difference between being embarrassed and being stripped of your humanity." That tape, he said, wasn't leverage. It was a leash. Something to keep him in check. Not just once, but for decades. And that's when he stopped trying to protect himself. He realized for the first time that he had been used and filmed without ever knowing it. Not for blackmail, not even for power, but because someone wanted control. By the time word got out, it was too late for damage control. Clips from the courtroom hit social media before the bailiff could even reset the room. The hashtags exploded. #Will Speaks, #Diddy Files, #Break the Silence. Will didn't look like the star people were used to. He wasn't polished. He wasn't media trained. He looked like someone who had carried something alone for too long and was finally done pretending. Within 24 hours, the backlash began. 2 major endorsements pulled out. A studio quietly paused promo for a film he'd already wrapped. Will expected it. I already lost something more important years ago, he said. My voice. But not all the calls were warnings. Some were thank yous. Quiet texts from actors, producers, even directors. Some of them just said, "You said what we couldn't." Others, more blunt. "You don't know who you just declared war on." One told him flat out, "You've made yourself radioactive." He didn't flinch. He'd made peace with it. "I'm not here to protect myself anymore, Saho," he told the court. "I'm here to protect the truth." He didn't name names publicly, but when the prosecution mentioned people like Kevin Hart, Meek Mill, and Lucian Grange, Will didn't deny knowing them or imply they were strangers to this system. "This isn't just a Diddy problem," he said. "This is about an industry that runs on silence. Everyone's been trading in that currency." He also made it clear he knew more might come out. "I expect footage. I expect smear campaigns. Let them. If that's the price of telling the truth, I'll pay it." And then he looked at the jury and dropped a line no one in that room forgot. "Sometimes the truth comes late, but it still hits like thunder." The judge gave him permission to speak directly. Will stood up from the witness chair, took a few steps forward, and faced Diddy head on. "You built an empire out of manipulation," he said. "You called it culture. You called it love. But all you built was fear." Diddy didn't respond. He sat still, his lawyer whispering something, but he didn't move. Will didn't blink. "I saw what you did to those girls. I saw what you did to me. I heard the things you said when you thought I wasn't listening. You broke people for sport." Then Will reached into his jacket and pulled out a photo, an old one, slightly worn at the corners. "This was me in 2004, right before the first party. That's the man I used to be." He held it up, not to Diddy, but to the courtroom. "I haven't seen him in years." He turned to the jury, scanning each of their faces. "If you think this is just about me or Cassie or one night in some mansion, you're not seeing the whole picture. This is about power. This is about control. And it's about what happens when the truth finally stops asking for permission." Then he looked back at Diddy, voice steady, nothing left to hide. "You once said nobody parties like Diddy. Wadafa, nobody lies like you either." And with that, he walked back to the stand, picked up his things, and left the courtroom. He didn't look back. He didn't wave. He just walked out the front doors with his head up, but carrying 20 years of weight on his shoulders. Diddy didn't speak. He sat there, pale, fingers trembling, for the first time, not in control of the room. Will didn't speak to the press. No interviews, no headlines, no follow-up statements. He left the courtroom like someone who wasn't looking for attention, just closure. But outside those walls, the world exploded. Within hours, Hollywood panicked. Crisis teams were called, executives scheduled emergency meetings, PR firms sent out internal memos, warning clients to cut ties and keep quiet. Agencies paused deals. Directors suddenly reevaluated projects. And all the while, the internet did what it does best, dug deep and fast. Old footage resurfaced. Videos where Diddy stood too close. Interviews where Will tensed when the wrong name came up. Photos from parties that now looked less like celebration and more like surveillance. Fans combed through everything, and they weren't just shocked. They were angry. Angry that someone like Will had to carry this for 2 decades. Angry that the whispers had been dismissed as conspiracy for so long. Angry that people in power pretended not to know. And then, the post. Will uploaded a black and white photo. Him on a film set in 1993, young, smiling into the sun. No caption, just one quiet line. He didn't know what was coming, but he made it through. I'm proud of him. No hashtags, No names, just that. The response? Instant. Millions of shares, tens of thousands of comments. Survivors, especially men, flooding the replies. Not with sympathy, but with solidarity. If Will can speak, so can we. Inside the courtroom, things moved quickly. More subpoenas were rumored, not just for musicians or assistants, but for executives, distributors, and media networks. Will's testimony didn't just expose one man, it cracked the structure, and whatever was coming next wasn't going to stay sealed for long. Insiders whispered about more footage, not just audio, video, locked away, sealed in court. If it ever leaks, insiders say the industry won't survive it unchanged. As for Will, he stepped back. No press tour, no comeback plan, just time with his kids. According to friends, for the first time in years, he wasn't pretending. The judge closed that day with a sentence no one saw coming. What we heard today was not just testimony, it was a reckoning. And the final image wasn't Diddy, it wasn't Will, it was the jury, silent, still, and visibly shaken. Because for the first time, everyone realized the era of silence wasn't ending quietly. It was being dragged out, loud, raw, and unignorable.